All right, guys, this one's going to be a spicy one. These are kind of myths and rumors, if not just complete and utter bullshit about electric cars, if not Tesla in general, just stuff people talk about that is not true. Some of the stuff's for fun, some of it's just to talk about, and then some of it's just to utterly dispel some of this shit. So let's get started. Let's talk about charging time. So one thing that's commonly brought up on the internet, or if not in person, I've been asked, is what do you do on a road trip? So I live in the Midwest where you basically have to drive everywhere. It's pretty normal to drive everywhere. Let's say that. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plus hour road trip is not uncommon here. What are you doing this summer? Hey, I'm driving to, say, Texas, like 15 hours, potentially 20 hours, whatever. Not uncommon. So common thing that's asked is, hey, how long does this take to get charged? So it's kind of a loaded question, but I don't want it to be loaded when I'm answering people. So I say typically 5 to 6 hours at home, and then out on a road trip, it can take about 15 minutes to charge. So another thing that's brought up as a side thing to that question is hey, so if I want to drive somewhere, let's say out of state, I'm going to have to plan it all out of where I want to charge. I'm going to have to figure out in advance of where I need to stop, right? And so I'm going to answer that. With a Tesla, you don't have to. Tesla is really well integrated, kind of like iPhone and Mac, to where they talk to each other, and it's like a seamless experience. So if you own a Tesla, for instance, if I wanted to go to Illinois, let's say Chicago, which is an 8-hour drive, 7-hour drive, if I put it in the maps in there, it's going to pre-route out all the chargers I need to stop at. Let's say I stop at 3 chargers along the way. It'll also tell me, in addition to that, how many minutes it's going to take for me to charge at that said station and what time I'm going to be arriving at my destination based on charging intervals and just the way to get there in general. So that's pretty neat. That's a Tesla specific thing. The same can be said about some of, I believe, GM's cars. They'll use the non-Tesla specific charging system. They can get auto mapped in some maps on the vehicle's infotainment display. So there's that. Gone are the days where you're really having to do that much, if at all, depending on the car you have. But the owners of, like, say, a Nissan Leaf back in the day, you had to plan them out based on how long you needed to be there, what charger specific. It used to be a mess, and I'm talking about years ago. For some vehicles that people still own that were old, and I'm talking about those like Nissan Leaf owners and some older generational, like maybe Hyundai Ioniqs that don't have that stuff built in, it can be pretty antiquated in the way that you still have to potentially plan out, and it's not the car that's doing it. So I will say that. As for the charging infrastructure for Tesla specific, I believe there's like 50,000 chargers. I could be off on that. Maybe it's 17,000, I forget. But there's also, in addition to that, a lot of regular, just non-specific Tesla chargers. So that's cool. Another thing to talk about, this is point number 2, kind of myth, is the cost to charge. So I've heard a lot of people say, oh, charging is way more expensive where I live. That might be where you live. It might be kilowatt per hour usage. Those people would see, maybe in the Northeast, electric rates are just generally really expensive. That's just due to infrastructure. But where I live, it's like 5 to 6 cents per kilowatt hour, which means I can charge my Tesla Model 3 Performance for about $15 a month. And I seriously do mean $15 a month on my charger right up there, the level 2 charger, Emporia charger. It's area specific. It's provider specific. Some people can see rates at 30, 40 cents per kilowatt hour. Some people in California could probably speak on that. And I know in some areas that are more, in some countries rather, it can fluctuate a lot too. But in the United States as a whole, it's not too expensive. Energy here is pretty cheap. And we also subsidize the price of gasoline or petrol by 50%. That's why gas here is so inexpensive compared to places like Europe, where a gallon of fuel could cost $7. Here in America, it's like $2.50 right now for regular. It's crazy. People complain about gas prices. So cost to charge on a level 3, a level 2, a level 1 charger, that's kind of different. I believe here around the Midwest, it's like 30 cents per kilowatt hour to charge on a Tesla charger. Again, that's mainly for road trips. If you're using level 3 chargers or whatever you call them for like a Tesla charger, those aren't really made to be designed to where it's going to maximize the savings for the end consumer. It's made for fast and easy fill ups, kind of like a fuel station. But I'm spoiled with living in a home, so that's different. Regardless, some people do depend on those, but mainly you're going to be using them for a road trip. But to fill this thing up on a fast charger, I've really yet to do that. I have stopped at them for fun to just try them out. But the last fill up I made was on my way back from purchasing this thing in Kansas. And I stopped there because I needed to, but it was like 30% charge. I think I paid like $4 or $5. It's ridiculous. So prices of charging, I wouldn't even say it's comparable to fuel. If not, some states I know you can get pretty close. If you're only charging off a supercharger, it can get even more expensive than filling up your car. But if you're charging from home, it is really cheap. I just completely write it off every month. I don't even pay attention to the price. Okay, another rumor to dispel is they catch fire. I'm gonna just say it for what it is. I think people forget that they have a hunk of metal traveling 70 miles an hour that they typically drive, and there is basically a bottle of 10 to 20 gallons of an explosive fuel sitting right behind them, if not under their children at any given point. I don't understand the logic of that. Do you guys remember the Ford Pinto, or do people just not talk about that when they're bringing up EVs in a negative light? For those that don't know, that was a car infamously made by Ford, and when it would get rear-ended, some of the time it would just blow up and catch on fire from the impact of it hitting the fuel tank. It's ridiculous. Anyway, I think electric cars get brought up a little bit more in the media if there is some sort of incident where it involves combustion on one of their vehicles, just because the internet is the internet. Now, I don't have statistics of my own, having done research to back that up, but think about how many vehicles you guys haven't seen driving by one of those vehicles and it was smoking or was it a result of a fire. How many of those were electric? I would say probably zero you've ever seen an electric car on fire. I've seen tons of vehicles on fire, and they're all internal combustion engines. But I'm not going to talk any more about that. I'll let you guys do your own research on that. I don't believe in that. But there also is a disproportionate amount of ICE vehicles currently in 2024 than there is to electric. So there could be multiple factors as to why you really don't see electric cars, if at all, on fire. So I'm gonna bring up the next point: battery packs, degradation of battery packs. Whether this be people saying that they only last like 5 or 6 years, let's say, they completely go out after a couple years, or people compare them to a cell phone almost. It's weird in terms of just like, owned it for 3 years, let's just toss it. Han, the new one came out, let's just get rid of that. So I'm gonna talk about the battery packs. First of all, I just want to say I got an iPhone. This phone specifically has one battery. Does everybody agree with me on that? There's one battery in this phone. So there are some phones that are manufactured with 2 batteries. It's called like a split loading or split cell or something like that. It helps with battery degradation. So we're going to talk about degradation on the battery. I own a Model 3 Performance. I don't know the kilowatt hour. It's like 70, 80 kilowatt hours, I think. I'm not too sure. But regardless, a cell phone battery and this kind of battery is not even the same. Not even the chemistry of the battery is the same. So I'm gonna start with this point. You got one cell in a battery generally, maybe 2 cells, meaning 2 batteries. There are thousands of them in vehicles, if not many, many, many hundreds. In some cases, I think there's 5,000, 6,000 cells per car or something, or battery. Regardless, if your one cell, meaning your one battery in your cell phone, starts going bad, you replace it, right? You replace that one battery. Now, if one cell starts going out on this, the car just shuts it off. Now think about how many thousands of these are inside of that. If one of these goes bad, it's not a big deal. They can just shut those batteries off, those specific cells. So the car doesn't degrade the same way if this does. The whole phone's screwed. It's one battery. these degrade at different rates, which means that the typical battery on one of these, I'm not even going to talk about the warranty, that it's 10 years, by the way, on one of these, if not 8 years. It's 8 or 10 years. Think about that. How many people own a car for 8 or 10 years these days? There's multiple cells. So the batteries on these can last, you can look this up, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600,000 miles in some cases. So they far exceed Lexus or Toyota engines. But the thing is about batteries, they don't require maintenance. Not even the motors require maintenance. And to achieve those kind of odometer readings on an ICE engine, it would require head gasket change, timing chain, coolant flushes, engine rebuilds. In some cases, the pistons might fail. Someone might have to do a complete engine rebuild. And how many tens of thousands of dollars might that cost, including fuel? So I'm not going to dispute that there are some vehicles, just as well as there's some Lexuses, that fail at 10 or 20,000 miles, if not 50. But on a general basis, these are going to far outlast in terms of maintenance, fuel saving, all those things added up, meaning a cost-free ownership along the way, with some minor stuff like tire rotation, of course. But it's not comparable. I mean, these are statistics backed up by the US government, Tesla or any foreign auto manufacturer included. I'm not specifying just this vehicle. I'm talking about any vehicle. The likes of Chevy or Ford making their Mustang Mach-E's, look it up. As long as they're using vehicles that are fully electric, maybe not built on the internal combustion chassis, because those could have some manufacturing issues along the way, which is a separate issue. But standalone chassis vehicles, it's quite impressive, actually. So to kind of finalize that, it's an electric vehicle, sure, but it's going to come with its own quirks, and I'll get into those, okay? So batteries, not really an issue. And a lot of these manufacturers come with huge warranties that far outlast modern day ownership. Most people lease nowadays. Imagine having a warranty in your car for 10 years. So I talked about the battery. Now let's talk about some of those myths, right? So I'm going to source my sources here. EPA.gov. This comes off the EPA.gov. So what are some of these myths? Electric vehicles are worse for the climate than gasoline because of power plant emissions. Because it's off the .gov website, I'm going to let you answer that one for yourself. And please do look these up if you disbelieve me. But I think being on the government website says a lot, right? That one's false. Electric vehicles are worse for the climate than gasoline because of the battery manufacturing. That one's also false. Again, I'm citing these from EPA.gov, okay? Electric vehicle batteries are unreliable and need to be replaced every few years. Again, I just cited that from EPA.gov, but I also just talked about battery tech in these. So I'm just going to wrap all of these things up. The misinformation that's going through certain channels, maybe being at Fox News, CNN, I don't know where people hear about this stuff, but it is crazy to me. And if you're wondering why there's so much misinformation, I would primarily say it's because of, it's kind of like big pharma, right? But we're talking about oil and gas industry. They're going to be out of refining at some point. The world will not need oil and gas as much at some point, just due to electrification. And why would they want electrification to happen at a sooner rate than they're probably planning for? They're going to pump out false media. I want to call it propaganda. And I'm not going to create a conspiracy about it, but I'll leave it at that. It's also people that are not informed. People that do love oil burning engines, which is fine. I'm not against them. I'm just saying facts on this video. But it's a lot of misinformation, and with the World Wide Web being how it is now, everybody's well aware of our current climate. It spreads. So I'll leave it at that. Hope everybody is doing well, and I'll be making more of these videos. Subscribe if you want to support my content. But thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it.